Okay, we want to welcome you out tonight. We're going to be talking about doing cousin research with the descendancy chart and FamilySearch. This is one of the two main ways to do cousin research that have been developed for us, where you can see a significant part of your family at one time. The descendancy chart is built into FamilySearch, and it's kind of a linear program. Whereas the other way, which we will be talking about in a couple of months, is Pazilla, which is a more of a visual type presentation. So for some people, this particular chart works better than Pazilla does, and for some people, Pazilla works better than it. So you just kind of have to learn from your patrons what way is the best way to teach it. So let's dive in. And what we're going to do is we'll talk a little bit about what it means to do descendancy research, talk about duplicates, because we always have to talk about duplicates. They never go away. Then we'll talk about the features that are found in the descendancy view, the different things that make up the descendancy view. And then we'll do some actual demonstrations, some fairly simple demonstrations of how using the descendancy view help me to find some new people to put into tree. So what is descendancy research? Well, it's the substitute for doing ancestor research. Many of us run into the problem when we have patrons that have pretty full trees that it's hard to do any help, even though ancestor research is our primary responsibility. Quite frankly, for some people, ancestry research is a very difficult and not a very productive program because so many people have worked for so long looking for their ancestors that it's hard to find any. And so you have to turn the other direction and start looking at the cousins, the aunts and uncles and cousins and all those to try to find people to add into tree. So the question might come, could they all already be found? So your family's an old-time LDS family, and they've been doing this research forever. The tree's full. What about the descendancy part of the tree? Well, you have to realize mathematically, you go back 8 generations and pick one of those 125 couples that are in the 8th generation that goes back and trace all of their descendants down with an average of about 5 kids per family coming down, you're going to run into 500,000 descendants on the low end of the guesstimate. There's going to be at least 500,000 descendants for those 8th generation people. And it's just unrealistic to think that they're all done. Yes, a lot of them will be done, but you're going to find that there's still a significant number in just about any tree that are still not found. And you just have to learn how to find them. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, this lesson is going to help you find those aunts and uncles, cousins, and their spouses and their children. That's what descendancy research is. Okay, duplicates. Why do we discuss this? Well, there's literally thousands of them in tree. And when you put a new person in tree, and this is really important, even if the system says there's no duplicate, about half the time you're going to find out there really is at least one. I love this picture, by the way. These are not duplicates. These happen to be twins, but it's kind of the same concept. This was a Sunday school or award in Utah back at around 1911 or so. And there were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pairs of twins in that ward. For whatever reason, twins were just going crazy in that ward. So anyway, I thought an ideal picture to represent this because the tree's kind of like that with duplicates. They're all over the place. And you really can get lured into thinking, oh, I've got a new person because it says there's no duplicate. Well, that's not the attitude to take. The attitude to take is to say, okay, it says there's no duplicate. Until they can prove to me that there isn't one, I'm going to assume there is one. Because a lot of times, very often, you're going to find a duplicate once you get enough information in this new record that you've discovered. So to save yourself heartache down the line, because the worst thing you can do is go to a, what do you call it? Go to a patron and say, hey, I want to, help you, and here's a lesson I put together, and then discover that you didn't really check things out very well. Okay, and FamilySearch is being very careful about suggesting duplicates, because the bad problem was when they first came out with new FamilySearch, they suggested, well, we'll be real generous with it because the people will know enough to know that if it's John Smith and Steve Jones, that those aren't really duplicates, even if we say they are. But what happened is if the church said those two people were duplicates, somebody out there would merge them, even though it wasn't really a match. And so they've turned the other way and become very cautious about providing us with duplicates. We have to kind of come up with them. Okay, and analyzing duplicates, the thing you have to realize is you're working against a mathematical formula. And they have what they call an algorithm, where they take all the parts of the person's record, their name, the dates, the places, the relationships, and they score the two records, the one that's the primary record and the one that might be a duplicate, based on how alike they are. And based on that score, the church will provide possible duplicates for the ones that are the closest to being the same. They give them a 5-point score, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if it's a 5 or a 4, they will provide it to us as a duplicate. They've now offered a new program where you can turn on the 3s, and I've tested it, and I'd say half of the time or more, the 3s are not duplicates. So anyway, you got to remember that. So I've done a little test to kind of show you. Here's 2 pretend records. Actually, I think that bottom one I took from Tree, I think. I don't remember. And I made up the top one based on that information. Would these 2 show up as duplicates? The answer is no. They will never, ever show up as duplicates in the form they're in. Look at the differences. John Brown versus John Anderson Brown. The top guy has an about year and a state. The bottom guy for birth has a day, month, year, and county and state. The top one has no death. The bottom one has death. The top one has parents. The bottom one has spouse. There's almost nothing there that can be scored as similar. And so even though they're really the same person, there's no way FamilySearch would ever offer that as a possible duplicate. The way to resolve it is, for the one that's on the top, is get more data on that person. Try to find out spouse if there's one, try to get a full birth date, find a death date, find out if there's a middle name, all those kind of things. You don't want to create records like that top one, because invariably you're going to open yourself up for creating a duplicate. And if you don't catch things, you could end up creating duplicate ordinances too. So that's my warning to everybody as we're doing any research for patrons. This is the thing we want to watch out for. Now, what can you do? What you can do is as you're building this person and putting it down on paper, as you check out the different possible records and things, is go into tree and go to find and see if you can find that person. Hopefully with a little more data, and hopefully the John Anderson Brown will show up for you if you add a little bit to John Brown. Okay, so some thoughts on duplicates. The more information a record has, the better it can be matched. So that's your challenge. Get a lot of information on these records you're creating. Adopt the attitude of, it's probably a duplicate unless I can't find one. And every time you add something to the record, check for the duplicate again. And the bottom line is we really only want one record. It's better to discover a duplicate than to create a duplicate and do the work that doesn't need to be done. And quite frankly, I've found very often, even though I find a duplicate for this record, the duplicate wasn't done. And so you're okay. Half the time or more, even though you might have to merge the record you wanted to create into one that's already in tree, you're still going to have ordinances to do, and you'll see that tonight. Okay, now the descendancy view itself. And some of these pictures are a little dated because I couldn't update them, especially in the demonstrations, because I can't go back and create situations that have been worked over with the new views. I can fix it here, but I can't do it when we get a little further along. So once in a while, the picture is going to look a little dated. It's going to be looking a little bit like what it used to look like. Okay, to find the descendancy view, you actually go to the pedigree charts in tree. And on the drop down, you find descendancy there. And then in the upper right corner, you're going to see the little slider symbol, which are the options. And these are showing you things that you want to show in that descendancy chart. You can show as little or as much as you want. Obviously, if you're working for a patron, you're going to want to show ordinances. You'll notice right away there's only 3 symbols there. There's one missing. You don't see a gray symbol for done. In the descendancy chart, if the work is done, there'll be no temple symbol. Or if it's not needed, there'll be no temple symbol. They didn't print the grays in there. They tried to make it simpler by only showing you if it was available, needs information, or in progress. Okay, but you can also show besides that, if there's record hints, you definitely want to show that. Research suggestions, for my personal tree work, I turn that off. You might want to leave it on. I want to see data problems to know if there's an issue. Portraits I turn off. It's cute to have them there, but it makes the descendancy chart run 3 times longer than if you don't have the portraits there. It makes like each line becomes about the space of 3 lines because of the circles for the portraits. I like to see the spouses shown, so I at least know if there's a spouse for the person or not, because that really helps me in knowing, what I'm doing and what I might be able to find. And then the bottom one is invert colors. For some of us, dark on a light background's good, and for other people, they want light on a dark background. And so that will invert the colors. I turn that off. I don't want that. Okay, the icons that are there. Just make sure you've got the temple icons showing. We know green means there's ordinances that can be reserved. The blue's a little bit tricky because what that means is officially it's called in progress. What that basically means is either you or somebody else has reserved it and not shared it yet, or you've shared it. You've either reserved it and shared it or just reserved it. Anything you've reserved and still have ownership of will be that dark blue. Other people who have reserved something but not shared it, it's going to be blue. If they shared it, it'll be green, and we'll talk about that. Orange means there's more information needed. That I love. I love working the orange people, because the orange usually is a very simple fix for most of the time. And then that turns on the people's ordinance work when you resolve the issue that caused the orange. And again, like I said before, the gray will not be seen because it does not show up. It's just left blank on the descendancy view to keep it from being cluttered. Okay, and then the blues are the hints. Those are your best friends. The hints can lead to new people. They don't always lead to new people, but they often lead to new people. So when you see a person that looks like a good person to do, and they have a hint, that's definitely a person you want to check. Okay, the data problem icon. Usually those are fairly easy to fix. Oftentimes it's like there's a typo error or something like that, or some bad research. Somebody's just made a bad guess for a date or something like that. And it'll cause like the child to be born before the mother, or the child married at the age of 1, you know, those kind of things. You will sometimes see a flag that comes up when you're exploring, in this case, opening up a green temple here to see what it has, and you're going to see this flag that says possible duplicates. Those have to be addressed before you can do any reservation work. You have to resolve the duplicate. You either have to mark it not a duplicate, or you have to merge. Because as long as it's there, you're not going to be able to do any reservation work. So just be aware of that. Okay, there's the 2 green temples. Should be familiar with those. The traditional green temple means ordinances can be done. It means nobody's done any reservations on it, so you can reserve, and you'll get 2 years. As soon as you do 1 ordinance on that person, they will then extend it to a 3rd year. You're going to see some right now that have some real strange long time frames because of COVID, as they froze it for years, but they still showed you the original reservation date. So you might have 5 years technically to get it done from the time it was first reserved, because of the years that the temples were closed and the reservation system was not functioning. And they just skipped over that and pretended like that didn't exist for their 2-year or 3-year period. Now, the temple with the clock means somebody else has reserved it and shared it with the temple. Now, you can take it and do it, but you can't take it and share it. That makes no sense. It's already shared. So they don't want you to grab it and then reshare it. You can take it, you get 120 days to get the work done, or it goes back into shared with the temple status. Okay, so that's how that works. So unless you're ready to do some work real quick, you probably want to be watching for the green ones that are up here at the top, but the bottom ones can be done too if you don't have, you know, if you're willing to get them done in a reasonable length of time. Okay, final suggestions, and we'll show you some examples. Take advantage of those icons. Work with the icons. Look for people that show no spouse, or show a spouse and no children, and hopefully show maybe a lifespan that would represent somebody who could have easily had kids. Those are what I kind of call the golden places to look. Sometimes you can go into a family that already has children, several children, and find some more. But the easiest ones are usually the couples that don't have kids, or the person who doesn't even have a spouse yet, but lived for a long period of time. Now, some won't marry, but a lot of them do. Okay. Open up people, when you have that list, you're going to click on the people you want to look at. I prefer to open them up in another window. The system is set up so that if you click on them and it opens up the little dialog box and you click on person to go to their person page, that it takes you from the descendancy chart to their person page on the same window. And then when you're done, you just hit back arrow and you're back in the descendancy chart where you want it. I have lost that descendancy chart so many times. I find it just much easier. Click on the person one time in the descendancy chart to get the little window, and then do a right click on person to see the person page and say open in a different tab. And that way it doesn't disturb the descendancy chart. As if you lose that place in the descendancy chart, it's a zoo to get back there, at least for me. So the best way to do it is just try to leave it undisturbed if you can. Okay, work the hints. And try to work that descent view in some kind of a sequence. Top to bottom, bottom to top, or find a spot in the middle and just work from there. But try to do it in a block so you cover an area. What I have learned, I love to go to the bottom of the descendancy chart, all the way to the very bottom and work my way up, because almost everybody else starts at the top and works down. And I bet you 99% of them give up before they get to the bottom. I found a lot of success down at the bottom of these. And then the other one that I just realized I needed to put in here tonight, you're obviously, if you're working for a patron, you're not putting these people in tree. You're not actually taking these hints and putting them in SourceLinker and running them through SourceLinker. You know, you're saving this for the patron. So you're going to be writing down what you find. And so you definitely need to remember, where did this descendancy list start? You know, who's the beginning person for it? You're also going to want the ID of the person you're working on or the people you're working on, and keep a record of what you did. I opened up this hint, found this. And then I was able to find this, you know, and then I found this. And just keep a record of what you found so that you can reproduce that for your patron. We don't show that when we're doing these demos tonight. So let's just see some demos. Okay, I like to start over in helper resources. And so I went to my own pedigree. And I went back, and I believe Henrietta is my third great-grandmother. And we've talked in the past about, you know, going back at least 2 generations before your family joined the church. Well, that wouldn't get me very far in my family because my mother's the convert. And that would only get me back to about 1850. So what I did is I went back several generations further to about a safe place, you know, little later than the mid-1700s. I feel comfortable picking somebody this far back because I've actually researched that line back to Henrietta. So I know it's a legit line. So I went and clicked on her tree and then changed the tree to the descendants. Well, actually, I went to the person page first. And when I got to her person page, here's Henrietta right here, I started thinking, you know, that's actually my direct ancestor. And I've done more work on her than I have any of the other kids. So let's try one of her siblings. So I went to Anna Christina, and I'm actually going to do her. She married a Philip Kramer. And I hadn't, to the best of my knowledge, ever worked the Kramer family. So I thought, well, let's give this a try. So since she's highlighted, I'll go to her tree and set the tree for the descendancy view. And that's what I did. Here she is with Philip. And I've set the generations for 4 generations, which is the max that you can get. What you do is they have little arrows here. And if the arrow's pointing to the right, that means that for that person, there's more descendants. And so I can click on it and it will open up their children. And so I could enlarge it there. I could also enlarge it down here. If you see a person like Peter Kramer here, who doesn't have a person attached to him, which would be the spouse. This is Lydia's spouse, George. Peter doesn't have a spouse, so he'd be one of those people I'd want to look at to see about extending the tree by maybe adding a spouse and then children. Whereas Lydia and George here, if I open that up, they're going to have kids, so I know I'm not going to be able to do anything there. But I did see at the very bottom of the chart here a couple of orange symbols, which meant there's a problem. And we need to figure out what the issue is. And it's a husband and wife. They do not have the arrow, so it means it's a husband and wife with no children. So this is an ideal family to look at. So I clicked on either Alexander or Magdalena and went to their person page. Okay, and when I got there, I discovered that there was a duplicate. And so normally you say, oh, shoot. I went ahead and said, okay, let's merge what we need to merge. I had to merge Alexander into a duplicate Alexander. I had to merge Mary into a duplicate Mary. And when I'm done with that and editing, cleaning things up a little, I now have a husband and wife with one child. Okay, we've got this Thomas Beale Cochran, who was born in 1821. So we've got a little bit of a family. I was curious to see if there was something I could, use to give me some ideas of this, if there's more to this family. And so what I did is I went over to Ancestry, to their trees, just to see what I could find. And sure enough, there was a tree over there that had this family, Alexander Cochran and Mary or Molly Kramer. And in that list of children is Thomas Beale Cochran. So that's good. That gives me the idea that there's another 4, maybe 6 children. There's 4 boys there that have births and deaths. And there's 2 children, Elizabeth and Catherine, that are girls. And so there's a good-sized family there. I am not going to copy that stuff into Tree. I'm going to go over in Tree and see if I can find any of this. So I'm in Tree, and I'm looking at Alexander Cochran's page, and it says there's a hint. Okay, remember, these hints are good because there's always a chance we can add somebody into Tree. If not, maybe we can add more detail to the person. So I clicked on it and opened it up, and the top part kind of sets the stage. It says, I'm looking at it because I'm looking at Alexander, who was born in Maryland, who's a male, whose wife is Mary Kramer. That's our couple. And they have a daughter, Elizabeth A. Lees. So this is really a record about Elizabeth. Remember, I said there was a daughter named Elizabeth. Okay, well, Elizabeth Lees dies in Ohio in 1917. And she was born on that date in Maryland, which fits the family and has the right parents. So we have found, thanks to that hint, a new person. So I say, okay, let's put it through Source Linker. So I've started to source it, and this is the old Source Linker that we just now can no longer get to, but I can't do it with the new one because this has already been done. So I've done the father and the mother. I'm ready to do Elizabeth. And when I click to add, it does not give me a card saying, here's somebody in Tree already. It just gives me a filled in set of data for a new person. Now, part of the reason was that last name, most likely. I got to be real careful. So I'm going over there. This is her married name. We don't put women in tree with their married name. We put in their maiden name. So I went and changed Lee's to Cochran. Now that messes up everything for this first check for duplicates, because it checked for possible duplicates based on Elizabeth A. Lees, which they probably are not going to find. And so I'm going to have to be super careful with this. So I go ahead and I add her in. And the first thing I did is go check for duplicates. And sure enough, immediately up popped a duplicate because I had changed the last name. And you notice, are these the same? Well, they've got the same exact name. They have the same exact birth and death dates and places. What's different is the one I'm working with has her parents, and the duplicate has James Samuel Lees, her spouse. Oh, this is a marriage made in heaven, a match made in heaven. This will bring the two records together, and they'll have all the information for that we need, really. Her parents and spouse both will be in the same record. You know, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, what about ordinances? Well, we just have to play it out and find out. When we get done, after the merge, this is what we end up with. We actually end up with a family because with that duplicate record, they had 3 children listed. And even after merging merging Elizabeth with Elizabeth to get just one record for her, it turns out that James and Elizabeth still need all their work. Because when we brought in that James, his work had never been done. The duplicate for Elizabeth had never been done. So my new one, which had never been done, equals still needs to be done. The first child, William, didn't have any work done for him. The second child, Mary, needed sealing to parents. And the only one done was Sarah. She was totally done. I kind of suspect that this information was entered by a descendant of Sarah's, because that's the one that's the most complete of all the people, though it might have been Mary because she has a death date and Sarah doesn't. But I don't know. That's just my guess. But that was so easy. One hint, a merge, and I've got 3 people's work to do. Okay, another example working off of a descendancy list. I found another one where we have the orange needs more information icon with a hint, and it's a Nancy H. Hufford. The hint turns out to be the 1880 census. It's kind of interesting when you look at it. We won't show it, that she's living in the home of Noah Bunnell and his wife Margaret, and it says she's the adopted daughter. And so they left her with her original last name, apparently, Hufford. Maybe she was older when they adopted her and she didn't want to change her last name. Okay, but anyway, that's why if you went and looked at the family, you'd see the daughter has a different name because of adoption. Okay, so here's her record. By adding just the date off of the census, that she was born about 1868 in Ohio, that turned it from an orange needs information icon to green do the work. But please, please, please don't stop there. Work on her a little bit and see if you can find a little more information. Can you find a marriage? Can you find a full birth date, a death date? Try to build her record up a little bit, because there could very easily be a duplicate out there. And that's what I always stress. And when I'm working, I have to do it. It slows you down. You have to take a little more time, but it's worth it. Okay, another example. We're working on Nora Nina Zoll. And she lives to be 83 years old. Can't see it because I've covered that up. And she shows no husband or kids. But there's this hint symbol. And the first one's find a grave. And find a grave has a husband listed. So I thought, okay, this is a good one to explore. Because according to FamilySearch, she's never married. So when I go to that source, find a grave, and look at it, it shows, or actually what I did is I found her on the marriage. I think it's a different one. I went into the records and said, let's just see if I can find some more things on Nora. And I found a marriage record for her with the husband, obviously. The marriage in 1919 in Indiana. Her father's Ed Zoll and her mother's Alice Babcock. That's who the parents are up above. The spouse is Thomas Raymond Black. So there is a husband, and that's the husband that was named on Find a Grave. But this way I actually found a real record for them. Okay. And what was interesting was when I looked this one up under her record and went into FamilySearch to records, you see that little symbol, the tree symbol, which means it's attached already. Well, I went in there and yeah, it's attached to her, but whoever did it did not attach her husband, and that's why he doesn't show up in tree. So that source was sitting there, and it would be marked if you looked at the sources that it needs more people, attached. And it turns out it's her husband who needs to be attached. So that was an easy one to add a person. Okay. Using hints to add a person. Again, we'll talk about Thomas Evans Sands down here at the bottom. That's his record over on the side. I saw the green temple with the clock, which means somebody's already reserved him. There's some hints. This is a couple that are already showing in the tree. I kind of cut his wife off by accident here. They were married in 1871, and they show no children. So I thought, okay, well, let's explore it. I like to look at couples that don't have kids. Now, he did die in 1877, 6 years after they married, so it's possible they never had any kids. So let's look at hints. So we went to his record, and he has 3 hints, and they all look very similar. The first one's a marriage. And the second one and the third one look identical, except for one says Thomas Evans Sands, the other one says Thomas E. Sands. You want to look at all these records that look so similar, because sometimes you'll find something that you didn't notice before or didn't get transcribed. So we're going to look at this third hint, because the second hint just had the basic transcription of the information we had about him and his death and burial. This looks like it should be the same thing. But when I click on it, it has the information on birth and death and burial. But it also has an image that went with it that the second one didn't show. The second one said no image. This one says image. And I can tell from looking at it right now what it was before I even opened it up. This is a burial record, and this is a transcription, or somebody went out into the cemetery and walked up and down the rows. This could have been 100 years ago. And they wrote down everything on the tombstones as they went, and they went sequentially down the rows. So you're going to see the graves in the order they were in the ground when that was done. And very often You're going to find things in here that you do not find in Find a Grave. I love looking at these transcribed cemetery records. I have found a lot of people on them. So here's that page. And here's Thomas, the guy we're talking about, Thomas E. Sands, who died in 1877, age 36. And I love they put the captions or the phrases, the little statements that are on there. Meet me in heaven, his says. But what really surprised me, though it didn't really totally surprise me, is they had a little baby. Her name was Carrie. She was born in 1875, and she lived to the age of 3 years, 8 months, and 7 days, which means she died about 1879, just before the 1880 census. So she'll never show up on a census. Dad's already dead by then, which means you would have trouble even finding Mom. I had to do a bunch of hunting. I finally did find Mary, the wife. She's not buried with him because she remarried. Her second husband was Allison A. Fashnacht, and she's buried with him and had a bunch of kids by him. But Thomas, her first husband, is buried with their child that died young. So I can add her into tree. She only needs to be sealed to her parents, but she's a missing child. So look at the records, not just the transcriptions, but try to look at the records if they're offered to you. Okay. And I think that's sufficient to give you, I think, enough ideas on how to do this. Do we have any questions?
Hey, Bob.